Can a hug between two exes be just that? A gesture of friendship? Can the past stay buried, allowing space for an honest bond to bloom in the present? Hmm? And what does an urgent interruption reveal about the tension between intimacy and momentum, between stillness and story? Find out this and much more next on Free Your Mind. Hit it. Welcome, folks, to the next read. We're still in chapter 7. Now we are at Orion, Opinad. That's the Magic Kingdom. We are in the Østre Tower, which is Jalen's tower. That is where we begin. Østre. Prince Casey walked into a familiar room in Østre. He noticed Jalen in the corner, sitting cross-legged, working on one of his many projects. Casey never failed to feel wowed by how handsome the open-eyed prince always looked. Jalen always kept his long, dark, curly hair pulled back in a ponytail whenever he was tinkering. Big Casey felt his little Casey starting to respond. He realized he had gone from an appreciation of Jalen's beauty to lustful thoughts of his friend. Then they went next level and pictured him, Jalen, and Ito together in a threesome. The avian prince took a deep breath as a wave of euphoria traveled across his body. Heavens, I can be such a slut, Casey gasped at himself. He realized that maybe it was why he and Joseph hit it off. The prince forced himself to stop lusting after Jalen. He instead tried to assess exactly what his buddy was doing. Jalen had a mess that seemed to spread all across the floor. You would think, being a prince, this place would look cleaner, Casey stated bluntly. Dressed casually in shorts and a t-shirt, he flopped himself down into the only cushy chair in the room. Casey allowed his slip-on sandals to fall off his feet in the process. Jalen never responded to the prince. Where is the help? Casey asked as he perused the room from his vantage point. Jalen seemed unbothered by the clutter that was everywhere. Casey stopped his investigating, intrigued by the giant chalkboard to his left. What really caught his attention was the weird writings all across it. Though unfamiliar with the text, Casey had seen it written a lot. It literally ran everything down to the very vehicles that people drove. Magic. It wasn't as if the avian prince was against it. He was just another non-magic that lived in a world of it. Casey thought of the Six and how he used to be so envious. Hawk changed that for sure. They are around here somewhere, Jalen finally answered. The prince looked up, smiling at him through a pair of magnifying goggles. Don't you have something better to do with your day? Blame Jia. She's the one who said you had a big surprise for me. Casey replied, running his hand across the chub that still strained his shorts. Due to this, not once had his gaze left the text upon the chalkboard. Spontaneously, Casey hopped up and walked over to his goggled friend. The avian prince was about to ask the Orion prince what it all meant. Ah, yes, Jalen remembered, jumping up as well. He removed his goggles, nearly face to face with him. Casey could feel that feeling in his pants begging to grow even more so. Should I kiss him? Or... So much conflict in his mind about this one. One little curl made its way across Jalen's face. The Opinad prince slowly touched Casey's hand to hold. Follow me. Jalen led his friend down the hall to a wall, stopping at a specific spot. Casey bumped his straining lump into Jalen's backside accidentally on purpose. Smiling in response, the twin just waved his hand across the wall and spoke some enchanted words. Up, Dior. Wow, this is amazing, Casey thought, staring in amazement. As the wall slid open, a secret room was revealed. Prince Casey looked around in awe at the space they had just entered. Very different from the cluttered-filled space they just left. He could tell by the walls that they were still in the tower, but it was so pristine. They moved a bit more inward, closer to the only window. Jalen motioned Casey to stay where he was, putting a hand upon his chest. He walked over to a particular structure, tugging on the dark cloth that covered it. Casey could tell the prince was ecstatic, turning back to him. You ready? Casey smiled happily in return, nodding his head yes. Ta-da! Jalen gave the dark cloth a good yank. Casey couldn't believe his eyes. The most beautiful thing he'd ever seen had just been unveiled. Sitting smack in the middle of the floor stood a new Dark Avenger suit. He walked toward it, hiding his excitement. Casey's reaction didn't display what he was truly feeling at all. He studied its beauty, taking in the deep reds that accentuated the black costume. Well? Jalen awaited his reaction. Casey looked slowly over at him, acting unimpressed. Well, what? Are you fucking serious right now? I literally redesigned Hawk's whole look, and you have nothing to say? Casey fought his urge to grin. He could tell the irritation in his friend's voice from his lack of excitement. Well, it's shinier than the one I have, Casey asked plainly. What's the difference besides aesthetics? In truth, he was admiring the reflective shininess of the metallic parts. Casey was deep in playing his part, refusing to acknowledge Jalen's frustration. What's the diff? Jalen huffed. Do you not understand what you're about to have your hands on? The suit you have now is a child's costume in comparison to this type of upgrade. Jalen reached into one of his many pockets, grabbed something, and tossed it at Casey. After struggling to catch the object, he looked down at what finally ended up in his left hand. It was a silver bracelet with a dragon's eye stone in the middle. He glanced up at Jalen with confusion, holding up the bracelet as if it were diseased. What am I supposed to do with this? You're an ass, he replied, finally getting wise to Casey's act. Jalen's tone became insistent. put the damn thing on your wrist. Fine, Casey sighed, rolling his eyes before doing as he was told. I know how much you love magic and incantations. All you have to do is touch the stone and say, Die Donker Vergelding. You don't say, Casey thought, grunting in response. The prince raised an eyebrow, gazing up at Jalen's with disdain. Finally, a smirk revealed his true excitement. Casey repeated the words. Die Donker Velderling. Whoa! Casey hollered, surprised as he was raised from the ground. Zing! Boof! These parts attached to him almost instantly, like a puzzle. Casey transformed from the cocky avian prince that he was into the newly, more menacing, Dark Avenger. Casey could not believe his eyes at the sight of himself. He was now encased in this shiny metallic armor. The suit glistened with sparkly magic. Jalen, it feels so badass. It's like a second skin. His voice echoed mechanically as he spoke. He covered with his gloved hands where his mouth would have been, gasping at the more electronic sound of his voice. Ha ha, yes, the voice modifier is pretty nice, right? Jalen smirked as he explained, moving around the inspected Casey. Jalen smirked as he explained, moving around and inspecting Casey. It's made to keep your identity more secure. No, you don't sound like you need a lozenge. I also reinforced your neck and your head stability just in case you run into any more Helgas. Wow, you did all this for me? Casey gripped Jalen's face with both hands, resting his helmeted head against Jalen's forehead. Jalen rubbed his hands down the front of the helmet, across the textured suit, and the mystical Firehawk emblem upon his chest. Even through the armor, he could feel the connection between the two of them. I did. Jalen's voice softened, still rubbing his hand over the new armor. Casey wrapped his arm around him, gently pulling him in closer. Almost as a whisper, Jalen added, It looks like it fits you exactly. Of course it does. You should know every part of my body by now, Casey responded, reminiscing on past events. Jalen slowly pulled away from his past love, clearing his throat to compose himself. Well, you know, he turned away, inhaling deeply, breathing out his heated desire before he spoke again. Jia helps the dads with running the kingdom, so, I tend to have more time on my hands. Casey wanted to tell Jalen where he could place those hands. He didn't want to push the issue, though. The prince did pull away from him. The avian prince remembered Joseph and their current status. His voice reverberated, his sigh at the thought. If only he could share Hawk with him, or even Daniel. Casey thought about his brother at that moment. He thought about how they used to be so close, how they had no secrets. He even thought of his parents, and how his resourceful father wasn't even aware of his alter ego. What if he ever found out? Casey really began to ponder what the outcome of that would be like. Does he know who the six are? The vigilante pondered more so, forgetting that Jalen was still standing there before him. Casey, I know we have Team Dragon Force to look up to, but Hawk is a different breed of hero. The young twin's words broke his inner monologue, pulling him from his family concerns. Jalen continued passionately. He is what the Trinity cities need, what Avian needs. He fills the gap. Die Dunker Vergelding. Casey responded by saying the magic words to power down. It was clear that he was smiling at Jalen when the helmet removed itself. Casey walked over to Jalen, the armor now resting back where it had before. Thanks to you, I can be Prince Casey and Hawk. He put his hand lovingly on Jalen's shoulder. Again, he pulled Jalen into him and hugged him tightly. Jalen could feel Casey's manhood pressing against his own. Feeling loved and blessed by his friendship was one thing. Were there room to reintroduce benefits into it? Just then, Jia ran in and witnessed Casey and her brother pressed together. Normally, something so intriguing would stop her in her tracks, but she paid it no mind. Jalen! She yelled, her big hair bouncing about as she rushed over to them. Startled by her abrupt entrance, the boys moved apart, giving her their full attention. Casey side-eyed Jalen, noting his slight frustration and their definite embarrassment at the interruption. We have a problem, she cried, her voice trembling as she moved quickly toward them from the entryway where she stood. Casey and Jalen exchanged worried glances. Jia, usually unshaken, stood braced in their entryway. Jia, what's wrong? Jalen asked, seeing the hysteria on her face. We're being invaded! She screamed after calming herself enough to speak. The Østre suddenly shook, causing them to stumble. What in the heavens was that? Casey asked, wide-eyed. Did something hit my tower? Jalen exclaimed. Yes, we are under attack! Jia screamed, her anxiety evident. The boys rushed to the window, Jia close behind. They saw the threat approaching, with more coming over the hill. The screams of their people echoed through the market square below. Holy fucking fuck, Casey muttered, seeing the chaos. He knew what he must do. It was time for the Dark Avenger to leave the shadows. It was time for Hawk to come into the light. Die, Dunker, Vergelding! Wow. Okay. I have to laugh on that one because we just went through so much emotion all at one time. So you have a Hulk suit that is brand new, being introduced. You have this romance between Jalen and Casey that shouldn't be happening. Right? You have the sister that's coming in, yelling and being hysterical. Right? And now Casey takes the brand new suit and puts it back on because now it's time to use it. They're being invaded. Holy moly. That's crazy. You know, or something else. Excuse me. You know, something else also is that this is your next to last read. I have decided that the next read will be the last. So, without further ado, let's head on over to the author's corner. Cue the music. Well, that was a pretty good episode, guys. We have just rolled ourselves into what seems to be the beginning of this invasion, right? This is the Secret War, right? The second part of the lead up, I should say, to the Secret War. This part here is a doozy, right? We're getting close to the end of this reading. Not the book, but this reading. So let's go ahead and fall right into these questions. All right, question number 1. Can a hug between two exes, Casey and Jalen, be just that? A gesture of friendship? Or is it more of a rekindling? I would say that what you have just heard pretty much is that there's something there, but it's up to them to either pursue it or leave it where it may lay. And Gia's interruption pretty much helped them make that decision, I would say. So, next question. Can the past stay buried, allowing space for an honest bond to bloom in the present? Again, their decision to make that happen or not. Gia barging in was really part of that decision, I would say, whether they can, because they were acting out of lust. They really were. So now that they can back off and think clearly, should they pursue this? Right? Where does Prince Joseph fall into this? That's what Casey has to think about. Right? So that's really a question I think that you should answer for yourself. What do you want to see happen? What do you think will happen? All right, last question. What does Gia's urgent interruption reveal about the tension and excuse me? What does Gia's urgent interruption reveal about the tension between intimacy and momentum, between stillness and story? Let's break that down. Gia's interruption pretty much nicks everything in the bud for that moment. So there was intimacy before, but now there's no real momentum unless they choose to push it, right? We already talked about that, right? But what does it reveal? It reveals that there's something bigger on the horizon, and this definitely has to be put on the back burner. That's what that reveals, right? Stillness and story. There's always a calm before the storm, right? And this story gives you that brief calmness, that connection between the two of them. And then the storm, aka the story, hits. Something's coming over the horizon. Things are hitting the tower for Østre. What does that even mean? What's happening? This peaceful connection and everything that's going on, all of a sudden, boom, is interrupted, not just by Gia, but by the bigger picture. And now we have to wait until the next reading, unless you have the book and you're reading along and you can keep going. We'll have to wait until the next reading to see what is happening. Well, guys, that's going to be about it for now. Please like and subscribe to this channel to finish this journey that we're on, and share it with as many people as you can. Get them involved in this. All right. I'm going to be your host, or I am your host, however you want to say it, Quentin, and this has been Free Your Mind. We'll see you next time. Toodles.